In our last conversation, Pedro, you made a really valuable point about avoiding the excesses and how rigorism on the one side, laxism on the other side. And there's a point in the book where you say that a person, or that when somebody does that, when they either try to obsess over the rules and follow them, perfectly every single time, or on the other side, whether they decide rules don't apply. We need to be maximally flexible in every situation. And both of them are trying to answer, how do I be a good person? You make the point that, well, both sides avoid or lose actually the center of this whole situation, which is the person themselves. Can you explain that? Because that seems like it's just such a surprising conclusion to make.
Yes, people, as I said in last talk, people are not machines. People are complex, and they exist in a reality that is also complex. So if you are too rigid, you end up losing the focus on the person. And this actually, there's a chapter that in which I focus on Pharisaism, and you can see there that the Pharisees and Jesus both were trying to be obedient to the law. Jesus says that he did not come to abolish the law, but the way they go about it, it's completely different, because one of them focuses on the law as an abstraction, whereas the other focuses on the law as being centered on the human person. And so when the law said that you should not work on Saturdays, that's the Jewish prescription of the Sabbath.
Mhm.
Why do we have that law? We have that law so that people might have some rest, and so that bosses will not oppress the people, that they with too much work will not overwork the people. And the same way, there was this law that said that the poor can glean on the fields. The poor can glean on the fields, so that they will always have something to eat. The people would gather, the owners of the property would gather the fruits, the grapes, and the cereal, but the thing that would be the excess will remain on the ground, and the poor can get it.
I thought that was I
Why?
love that.
So
Yeah.
that people would have food. These laws existed so that people would have food and people would have rest. It's good for the people. But
Yeah.
the Pharisees saw the disciples gleaning on a Saturday and said, no, you cannot do that. That's work.
Hmm.
So, according to their interpretation of the law, you cannot work on a Saturday, even if it is to glean. So, the poor had to starve during Saturday because they could not work. And this
Right.
is a complete perversion of the law, because the law was not established for that purpose. The law was established for good, and they were using the good of the law for evil. And
Hmm.
when Jesus confronts it, and that's the problem with the rigid people, that they are so focused outwards,
Yeah.
they do not focus inward. And so Jesus confronts them, and what do? The Bible says they go out and start conspiring against him.
Hmm.
And Jesus had said, what is truly breaking the law? Doing good on a Saturday or doing evil? Working good on a Saturday or working evil? And they started to work evil on the Saturday because they were conspiring against him. So they were being rigid about these small matters, which were that the poor must have something to eat, but they did not have any problem working to kill a person on a Saturday. And this is the perversion of the law. To For Jesus, following the law and helping your brother, there's no difference, because the law exists to help your brother. But Pharisees saw a division here. They had a hermeneutic of rupture, in which you had to choose between following the law and helping the brother.
Hmm.
Eh, that's one of the dangers of rigidity.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're routinely throughout the book, you're showing how this is not just a like a heretical position. This is a how do you say it? Not just a compulsion. It's an attitude of the human soul that we
Yes,
routinely return to. And the Holy Father, I mean, you show throughout the stories throughout this book that there's it's like it can lead into a fundamentalist extreme when you misunderstand how we should be relating to the authority of the church, to the authority of Christ, to the relationships that we have with each other. And if you don't balance that, you end up collapsing into well these horrific positions that have led into very dangerous situations. And can you outline a little bit about how you went so in doing the research and going through the different movements in history and so on? They're neatly divided into these neat chapters like the Cathars and Jansenism. It's just a fascinating overview of history. um, I guess what my question is, those who locked themselves up into these mindsets, they more often than not seem to have a majority position. Like most of the church or most people, they were just very, very popular because it felt very obvious. And it seems very simple to follow this line of
yes.
thinking. But then it's like the church would always kind of squeeze out, of that moment in history and get past this gridlock that would seem to happen on the throat of the, of people. How did the church avoid this error of laxity, but then not go into this fundamentalist extreme, which the Holy Father today is still calling us to be aware of this?
Well, the reason why the church did not fall under either extreme laxity and rigidity is very simple. It's because the church is guided by the Holy Spirit. Otherwise, if it was just a human institution, they would have fallen in either extreme sooner or later, as
Yeah.
the people who have gone out of the church
Hmm.
have done.
Yeah.
But regarding what you said about this this extreme of fundamentalist, it's true that rigidity tends to be a simple answer because people want simple answers. And
Yeah.
one of the things that Pope Francis speaks a lot when he talks about rigidity is the security that rigidity gives you.
Hmm.
And Professor Rocco Buttiglione, who wrote the foreword for the book, also mentions that rigidity gives you a certain sense of security because you have this checklist.
Hmm.
You have this thing. You do this. I'm safe. But
Yes.
the problem is, reality is not like that. Life is an adventure,
Hmm.
and that's why Pope Francis says that the the antidote for the rigidity is being open to the God of surprises. They hate that. They hate that because they think, oh, this is to justify all that is bad. No,
Yeah.
the God of surprises. But the God of surprises is very traditional. Saint Peter, when he received that dream in which he had to eat the impure meats, which was something that the faithful Jew could never do, he was surprised. The Bible says that he was surprised. Cardinal Newman, when he talks about the development of doctrine, says that Peter was surprised. It's the God of surprises. And
Hmm.
this just shows, for example, the Pharisees were the people at that time that were fulfilling their religion more perfectly. They were following their religion more perfectly. They fulfilled all the rules. They did everything okay. They did everything right. And then the plenitude, the fullness of their religion incarnates, comes into them,
Hmm.
and they, the perfect ones, cannot recognize it
Yeah.
because of their rigidity, because they thought that they were doing it everything right. So
Hmm.
they did not allow themselves to be surprised. They lived the law as an abstraction, as I said, and they did not conceive that God loved us so much because they did not have love, they had justice. But they cannot conceive that God loved us so much that the law itself, the lawgiver itself, would incarnate to explain the law to them. And they said, no, we already fulfill the law perfectly. We don't need anyone to teach us that. So the God of surprises came to them to surprise them, and they did not allow themselves to be surprised. They already know. There's nothing that can surprise me. I know everything already.
The last episode, you mentioned that you had gone through the Vatican website and you'd searched for everything the Holy Fathers had to say on rigidity, and you found a list of everything that, especially with that word in it. So you pulled up all of his Saturday, what was it? It was his homilies, I think it was. And
It was homilies, documents, interviews, speeches, everything
yeah,
is everything
so
that I could get my hand on.
yeah, and then read through it and look for the patterns to try to discern, try to
Yes.
understand what it means to him and why does he keep bringing this, coming back to this, returning to this. And there's like, I think what you were saying, I want to keep going with this idea from last time. There's something unique about this message in that I'm grateful that you stepped up to write this book, and then you've gone to do it in a very friendly and informative way that helps us to not only understand the history of the church in light of this human compulsion, temptation to be perfect or to be perfectly free, and those two different attitudes. But the Holy Father constantly reminding us that these issues are things that we are struggling with today. Humans will forever be struggling with them because the mature, discerning Christian adult is the one who learns to understand the rules and then know when to apply them to be able to still see the person. So I, tell me a bit more about, you have a background not only in writing previous books, and I'll let you bring the names up again, but you're also one of the co-founders of Where Peter Is. So in many ways, you're on the front lines of messaging with people, you're on Twitter, and I see you all the time responding and chatting to people. So you're constantly watching the news, talking to people who are struggling with, resenting, complaining against the fact that it seems obvious the Holy Father is talking about them when he's talking about being rigid. And maybe for some of them, if the shoe fits, I'm going to put my hand up and say, absolutely, me, totally my background. I've only really, in following the Holy Father, started to come a long way in trying to get over my own rigidity because, my gosh, I was so sure I had it made and I was going to make it, and God was very happy with me. And okay, ultimately, I know he is, but I still have a ton of work to do, and being rigid was not the answer. I needed to, learn to let that go. So in you writing this book, you're also doing it as a response to a ton of conversations and a complete lack of anybody actually taking what he has to say seriously on this topic.
Yes, that's true. Though the the debates were important mostly for me to notice also this pattern of equating rigidity with faithfulness and trying to find to discover that this deeply ingrained idea in them needed to be addressed because they did not put it in, they did not put it in question. And this is important because there are many sins. There's not just one sin, and there's the sexual sins, and there's the sins of the flesh, gluttony, and then there's greed and all of that. And you must conquer those sins, of course, through the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
We must always, it's not through our merits; it's through the grace of God. But if you conquer them, it's very easy, and that's why the patterns are recurring throughout history because it's always the same temptation. If you master all these sins, these material sins, you risk afterwards falling into pride, which is the mother sin, and and it's a sin of the spirit, and it's graver than the sins of the flesh. Why? Because through this, it's worse when your spirit is sick. Of course, when the flesh is sick, when you have the sins of flesh, they are evil, certainly, no doubt. But the sin of the spirit is worse because it's like you need to see your path, but your eyes are sick. You need to listen to a word to know where to go, but your ears are sick, and you need to be open to God correcting you, but your heart is sick and you not accept correction. And you we must always be corrected. We I think the what I'm saying is also something that the Eastern Orthodox mention a lot. It's the prelest. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a sin that affects the saints. Why do they think? Why do people think that when Pope Francis is criticizing rigidity, he is attacking faithful Catholics? Because this is a sin of the faithful Catholics.
Ah, wow,
Uh,
what a great point.
yes, the so uh, so people who are faithful, they must understand that just because they reached another level, that doesn't mean oh, now I can rest here and just tell people here or down below what to do. No, no, you reach this level, you have to go a little higher and a little higher, and you're going to keep going until the day you die. You will have to keep improving and finding new things that you couldn't even conceive when you were down below. So you cannot tell those people down below, no, look at me, I'm so high. No, no, you have to keep going up, so
Mhm.
that those who are down below will look up to you and see, oh, he can go down, I also want to go up. It's not for you to
Yeah,
gather a podium to speak to the crowd.
yeah.
No, just you have to keep going. You have to keep going, and it's going to be harder for you than those down below. So, but you have to keep going, and that's how you do it. The people will look and say, "I want to be like that." There's a new challenge that I never thought it was possible. Keep going, and you'll never go. You will never reach that top of the mountain, because the top of the mountain is God. You can only find it through a beatific vision at the end of your earthly life, and even after you're purified on purgatory. Even after you die, you might need to be purified even still. So you have a long way to go. So no, you have
But
to
is this
accept correction. You have to accept
yeah,
correction, even on the things that you do not believe that you accept correction, because those are the most important things. That's what the faithful Catholics say to those who are lax, to those who are secularized. You have to accept correction on those things that you believe you do not need correction. So, with what authority do they say that to others and they do not accept that to themselves? They need to give the example. We need to give the example.
yeah, yeah. When you say earlier we're unwilling to accept correction, it's also you because this is absolutely what I would think, which is I don't need correction. I've got it figured out. I'm okay, and my attitude is, like you say, when your eye is sick, what how much darkness is there in you? Again, what I loved about this book, and this is routinely what happens when you read the Holy Father and you sort of you walk with him and you try to enter into his mind, you find that whatever his reflections are on history, they always apply well to everybody. They always they mention the past, but it's because they constantly exist in every person. So this book, kind of like your last one too, I felt even more so with this one. Reading this book felt like, sure, a passage through history, like really helpful handbook to have on your bedside table for everything going on in the church today. But it's also a spiritual retreat. You've kind of guided us in your Pedro way. You've guided us through all of the insights the Holy Father has gone on to share about this and how to discern. So for wrapping this part two, and we'll come back to part three in very soon time here. Where can people find the book online? I will include a link in the description. Folk can go check it out on Amazon. Where can people learn more about you, Pedro?
Um, they can find the book on Amazon.com in English, in Portuguese, Amazon.es, which is Spain, but you can distribute to Portugal, or Amazon.com.br for Brazil. And you can order it online, Rigidity, Faithfulness, or Heterodoxy, or in Portuguese, Rigidez, Fidelidade ou Heterodoxia. And if you want to learn more about me, my website, pedrogabrielwriter.com. All my books are there. Everything that relates to my writing is there. So you can also check that out there.